What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Fantasy Football Weekly. On today's show, we're going to be talking about news and notes from around the NFL, like we do every single week. We're going to be talking about some of our takeaways in terms of dynasty strategies. We're a week away from the NFL draft. What kind of moves can you make now in your dynasty leagues that could be advantageous for you in this last week, as well as talking about some players that we think are kind of locked, bulletproof stocked, players you can really take home to the bank, have no qualms about how they'll produce this year, and players that, quite frankly, we're concerned about that may take a couple of years to develop. Before we get to that, let's get to this. All right, folks. So I am Jorge Edwards. You can find me on X at Jorge B. Edwards. Joining me tonight, got a couple of fantasy and framers and an OG fantasy and framer who we'll get to in 1 second. Keith Fleming, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Let me start off. I'm going to go a little sour patch here on you. First, I'm going to be sweet, then I'll be sour. I'm going to go opposite. Jorge, okay. First of all, I wanted to wish you a very happy birthday. I know it's not until tomorrow. One of the best dudes I've met in a long time. I hope you have a great birthday. But I also want to shit on you slightly. Great title for the show tonight, the final countdown. But how did we not come in with it's the final countdown? Come on, Jorge. You're better than this. That was a layup.
I know the copyright issues got in the way. What can I say? But yeah. Rhett Manuel, how are you doing tonight, man? You and I, we had some fun on Fourth and Frames last night.
Oh, did we have some fun? I mean, still a little bit heated, maybe even a little bit worked up over the Rachaad White debate we had. But you know what? Tonight, new night, new us. We're here to pop some water bottles, just talk some fantasy ball, and generally have a good time. So thanks for inviting me, man. Happy to be here.
I'm disappointed in both of you if you're arguing over running backs because they're just not valuable in general. So you're wasting your breath.
Well, thanks for just basically ruining the entire episode of Fourth and Frames last night, which you can go check out
Keith.
Everywhere you listen to podcasts and on our YouTube channel. But before we get to talking about all of last night's shenanigans, I want to bring on somebody right now who, like I said, he was with us at Fantasy and Frames for years, a couple years ago. And, once a member of the Fantasy and Frames family, always a member of the Fantasy and Frames family. You can catch him as the host of the Dynasty Fever Pod. The host of Dynasty Saturday Night 5 show for Going for Two. You can see all of his article work over on goingfor2.com. Mm-hmm. I give you a guy who I just, always friends with, always consider to be a friend of the industry, and somebody who you should be following at @FFJunkie_ if you're not already. Mr. Brian Ford, how you doing, buddy?
Really good. Thanks for having me on. First of all, it's good to be back in the frames, so to speak. Really good to see you, of course, and Keith. Again, familiar face. Nice to meet Rhett.
First ever Fantasy and Frames show was with Brian.
Yeah. Hey, there's Nate. All right. So just real quick, I do want to say, since I've been away from Fantasy and Frames, the growth of y'all's brand and your content is just tremendous. And you do it the right way with good people. And, there's a brand that I don't exactly love as much as Fantasy and Frames. And they were talking a while back about, a YouTube presence where it would almost be sort of like their YouTube channel would be like a TV channel. Like there's just constantly shows on. And like every time I open my YouTube app, there's like a Fantasy and Frames thing, like in the feed, like, because and it's not in the sense that like you just churn out content for content's sake. Like this idea of a weekly like I grew up on This Week in Baseball, Mel Allen when I was a kid, right? Like this kind of stuff, like we need this kind of stuff. We don't do it much in the fantasy space. So, just much love and kudos and really good to be back. Yeah.
Dude, first of all, thank you very much for the kind words. That is high praise, and thank you. And that's what we try to do. We try and keep the quality, consistent, but at the same time, like take an appreciation for the fact that there's so many people out there that love fantasy football, that love the NFL. it's just it's just a pleasure hearing you saying that. Nate Markham with what was the name of that baseball show that you were just
This
mentioning?
Week in Baseball.
This Week in Baseball. Nice. For those who don't know, Nate Markham, our director of IDP, when he's not covering football, he's covering fantasy baseball. So he definitely liked the throwback there.
Also, I like how he said hi to Brian, and then I guess screw me, you, and Rhett. So thanks, Nate. Appreciate you as always. Chiefs fans, they're out of control. Their egos are out of control.
Well, when you'll have an opportunity to say that to him quasi in person.
When's that?
Keith? Next week when we have the Fantasy and Frames round 1 coverage of the NFL draft starting at 8 p.m.
AKA the saddest day of my year. So.
Oh yeah, he's a Falcons fan. They're always terrible.
Yeah, we fuck it up, man, every year.
Which Brian, of course, are welcome to come back if you are so interested and available. Throw that out there. So Nate will be there by hell or high water. I'll make sure he's there. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Mr. Markham. But I digress. Before we get into the topics for tonight's show, though, let's do a quick recap of what you saw here at Fantasy and Frames this past week. And of course, we start things off with Fantasy and Frames Wednesday, where we basically go from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. nonstop show.
You went from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. nonstop. Show off.
Well, we as a brand did this together. See, Nate says he'll be there next Thursday. Fantastic. JT Orange, Justin Taylor, him and I did Dynasty 365. We were covering the tight end position in terms of rookie prospects heading into the NFL draft. And to be honest with you, before the show even started, Justin and I were like, so this will be a good 30 minutes and then we'll be out of here. And we went in like 5 minutes over an hour. So definitely worth checking out. A lot of good information there. Then, of course, as I was alluding to a little bit earlier with Rhett, I joined the Fourth and Frames crew with Chris Battistell and Drew Scott and Rhett Manuel. Even had a surprise guest show up, Justin Taylor, to talk about, just our dynasty rankings, our discrepancies between our rankings, and just our general thoughts overall between now and the NFL draft in terms of rankings. And then JT and I finished it up on Shoot the Gap, talking about IDP rookies at the defensive back position. So definitely check that out. And where you can check that out is on the Fantasy and Frames podcast. You can listen to each individual show, either the Dynasty 365 podcast, the Fourth and Frames podcast, or the Shoot the Gap podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if I say podcast one more time, I'm going to slap myself. You can also go and check out the shows
Good job.
on our YouTube channel, where you can also like and subscribe, so that way you're notified whenever we drop content here at Fantasy and Frames. And with that, gentlemen, let's get into some news and notes. And I'm going to start, Brian, with you as the guest here, and I'm going to throw a little nugget your way in terms of some information that happened a day or two ago. And I know this is like super exciting stuff, so just get ready and brace yourself. Royce Freeman is a Dallas Cowboy. How excited are you for that? And please be as sarcastic as you possibly can be.
Do you have a Crickets audio drop?
Should probably have.
Listen, I think we all know the Cowboys have a pretty wide open backfield. Everybody is mocking running back to them at 56 or 57, or maybe later, right? Freeman got carries with the Rams. Like Kyron got a lot of usage, but they still gave the ball to Ronnie Rivers and Royce Freeman occasionally. I'm not saying I have fantasy interest in Royce Freeman, but I also know that the rumors are that the Cowboys are kind of like, they're not going to give Dak a deal. They're going to let him play it out, and Jerry's definition of all in that he said is very different from what people expected. And now you've got Royce Freeman, Rico Dowdle, and the dude from Tennessee, Hassan Haskins, right? He was on the Titans.
Yeah.
Or wait, no, is it him
No.
or?
Hold on, I had this up the other day. 1 second.
He was a rookie around that same time.
There's Deuce Vaughn. There's Malik
No,
Davis.
the guy from
Malik
Mississippi.
Davis.
Oh,
Malik
yeah, but
Davis.
also the guy from Mississippi, Snoop Connor. There you go.
Snoop.
Yeah. I got him and Haskins mixed up. But anyway, like a bunch of jabronis, So so Freeman right now is the head jabroni. I don't know what the contract's like. He's probably very cuttable for them as far as the money goes. I still expect them to draft somebody. But I would not be surprised if there's a week where someone tweaks whatever, and Freeman annoys us by complicating the Cowboys backfield. But otherwise it's basically crickets.
Very nice. Got Crispy in the chat stating repping the Expos. Let's go. I think that's. I hate to say this to Chris because I know he's a Toronto guy, but like, aren't you throwing a little bit of disrespect towards the Blue Jays by being so proud of the Expos hat, or is it just pro Team Canada all the way around? I don't know. But it is a nice hat, Rat.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say
Canadians
this.
stick together. Come on.
And I'm going to say this. I mostly rep the Montreal Expos gear because, number one, they're defunct. Number two, the logo was awesome. And number three, that strike shortened 94 season where they got robbed of a World Series opportunity is still criminal in my mind. So it's fine.
Nice. And you got to like the font and the print and the color distribution right there on that too. So what do we say here? We the North. There you go. There you go, Chris. Anywho,
Fucking
Keith,
Canadians. Goodness gracious.
tell us how you really feel, Keith. And
Hey, I'm part Canadian, so I can say it. My
Are you really?
My grandmother's from Canada. So
Crispy has some choice words for the Montreal Canadiens, though. Okay, fair enough. Let's get to Keith now. Brandon Aiyuk, man. I keep hearing about Brandon Aiyuk every single week. I've been hearing about him every single week. There's trade requests. There's not trade requests. There's, we talked about it here on Fantasy Football Weekly. Where would we like him to go? Where would be the best landing spot in a trade? Like, with all this going on, do you think, in your opinion, this is just a smokescreen that is just not going to be solved until either during the draft or after the draft? Or do you think there's some validity here?
I think there's no validity. The reports are coming from some dude who is basically not an actual journalist and does not have a history of breaking news. And how that stuff snowballs, right? Like, he shares it and someone else and other people are saying they're hearing things. I mean, that's basically code for I'm making it up as I'm hearing. You can be talking to yourself and hear things. Brandon Aiyuk is like going to be with the Niners. I would be shocked if they end up letting this guy go. They know what they have. Unfortunately, I think the casualty is going to be Debo. They're going to play this season out, and basically moving forward, they can't pay both, and they're going to end up getting rid of Debo. And I think keeping Aiyuk. You have Purdy, who's this young QB. Kittle's a little bit older. CMC's a little bit older. To me, Aiyuk is the guy that's your future. Like, he's the one constant you have for this really good young quarterback and the best offensive minds, offense in football. I mean, Shanahan, I can't stand him, 28-3, RIP, but he is a really good play caller. And I just can't see him having a weapon like that is this young. And they're not going to pay him like top-notch wide receiver. Sure, he's going to get the bag, but it's not going to be insane. And I think his best production is still to come. So I think it's a lot of smoke. I think he'll be on the Niners this year. I think the Niners are going to be really good. They got 11 picks in this draft. I think they're going to solidify the offensive line, which is really their one weakness, and a big receiver class. I could see them taking another wide receiver relatively early. And I think it's Debo who they eventually get rid of. But I would be shocked if Aiyuk's not on this roster next year.
Brett, let me ask you a question. You take away the top three, you take away Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, but all the other wide receivers in this rookie draft class, where does Aiyuk fall for you? Would he be the fourth wide receiver there in this group of wide receivers that I'm listing?
Okay, so you're telling me between Marv, Malik Neighbors, Brandon Aiyuk, and Rome Odunze.
No, so you take away the top three rookie wide receiver prospects that everybody's talking about, whether it's Neighbors, Malik Harrison, and Rome Odunze. And now I'm talking about this from like a dynasty value perspective in terms of like what you're willing to invest in terms of acquiring draft capital for your rookie drafts or going out and making a trade for a wide receiver. Where do you put more stock in? Trying to get the known sure thing that you've seen with Aiyuk and make a trade at this point right now, 1 week before the NFL draft, and getting Brandon Aiyuk? Or are you staying pat with your first round rookie picks and wanting to get one of these younger wide receivers?
I mean, it's a team build question. I mean, if you're in a championship window, Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. In terms of win now, I would probably go Aiyuk, Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze. That'd be what I'd rank there. Now, if you are a guy who needs to rebuild, then I probably still have Aiyuk third above Odunze in that situation, which is just a long way around saying that I am really in on Brandon Aiyuk this season. Whether he's traded or whether he's a Niner, I said it last night on fourth. I think he's the top option in that offense this year in the passing game. I think there are big things on the horizon, like Keith said. I think he's getting ready to get paid wherever he goes, probably in San Francisco. But I mean, I'm just very in on Brandon Ayuk overall as a player this year because whether it's the size, the speed, the route running, he does all the things that these receivers coming into the draft, like Ladd McConkey, are being touted for in terms of route running. And he does it with polish because he's been in the league for 3 years. So if you want to take that guy and put him on pretty much any dynasty roster I'm going to put together, I'm definitely in on that.
Just turned 26, like literally just turned 26 a month ago. So also very young. I mean, you still got plenty of time with the wide receivers prime now extending into most of them, at least the early 30s.
Brian, are you equally as high on Brandon Ayuk in terms of just value overall? Or would you rather, I guess let me rephrase the question for you now. If Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze were not available, right, and you take the rest of the remaining wide receivers in this, in terms of the depth in this rookie class, would you rather have Ayuk or would you rather invest in the long term with a younger wide receiver?
No doubt Ayuk. Not only as Keith said, is the age difference not big at the moment. He's proven, he's efficient. I'm probably also higher on him than a lot of other folks. I think he's in my top 12 dynasty wide receivers, like not counting the rookies. And I would imagine that he'd probably stay there after the draft. Maybe have Marv ahead of him. People have rookie fever, so there's probably a case where I might have a Marv pick. Maybe it's in the first round and I've got the 102 or whatever, and I can flip that for Ayuk plus probably in some leagues. But more directly to your question, like compared to, I'm looking at my wide receiver rankings right now, I would want Ayuk over every single one of them, no matter where I was in my cycle of winning or competing. And I think if you've got, I don't know, like the 110, right? And a lot of people, right now, just, we're messing around in these rookie mocks. And that's the area where a lot of people are taking Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell, sometimes, Troy Franklin and that sort of thing. Like, if I could trade that pick for Ayuk, I'd do that not 100 times out of 100.
Nice.
Here's the Ayuk kicker that we need to realize in terms of how efficient he is. Per player profiler last year, number 24 in the league in receptions with 75, and number 7 in the league in receiving yards with 1342 at 18 yards a catch. Dog.
I think he was the only receiver last year who, I think David Gattieri tweeted this, I think. 1,000 plus yards and 60 or something 60 missed tackles forced, something like that. Anyway, it's a really he's underrated because of the CMC and Debo and and Purdy and all this. Because they spread the ball around. If he ever got a gig where he was like clearly the one, people say he looks like Mike Tomlin, right? So what if the Steelers trade 20 for Ayuk on draft night? I think probably won't happen, but boom, love it because I think Pickens' ceiling is sort of a boom bust kind of guy, like a wide receiver 3 in fantasy, not on the team.
He needs just a competent QB. Haven't watched Pickens at UGA. He needs somebody who's accurate. Like until he gets a quarterback who can get him ball. What Pickens does great is actually catch the ball in traffic, the way he can move his body to make receptions. But also Ayuk, the number 1 PFF graded wide receiver this year. And if you remember, his first 2 seasons kind of had some off the field chemistry stuff where the team really didn't give him a full run of it. They came into this season saying he was going to be, their guy in the passing game. And look what he did. So I think that this is kind of almost the floor of his stats moving forward, because as these guys are, pointing out, Kittle's getting up there in age. If Debo ends up getting moved or he's always hurt, right? It's just more opportunities for Ayuk.
And he unfollowed the 49ers, which is always means that there's going to be a breakup. So, yeah.
Exactly. Let's go around the frames really quickly. Got a question here from Cats Took Over on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Doesn't matter whether you're in rebuild mode or win now mode. Are you taking Ayuk over Marvin Harrison? Rhett?
No, simply because you have about 4 extra years on Marvin Harrison versus Brandon Ayuk since he's like 22 years old.
Keith.
No, I actually think they're close because we don't know exactly what Harrison's going to be, but you could then flip Harrison for so much more than you could Ayuk for the same reason that, if somebody's really high on him, you get a huge haul on him. So I'd rather have the asset.
And Brian.
I agree with what was said before. Marv is probably the only rookie I would take over Ayuk. And to add to what was said by Rhett and Keith, is just comparing the two players, not thinking about whether I'm going to flip them or their age or anything. If people are right about Marv, his ceiling outcome, right, like his 75th percentile outcome plus is just through the roof, right? And upside wins championships. And so as much as I do love Ayuk, I think, what we're dreaming about Marv, if it happens, is going to be special. And yeah, so Marv. Yeah.
All right, Brian, let's stay with you. Last night, news came out of the Chargers that they signed J.K. Dobbins, reuniting him with Greg Roman, yet another Raven running back heading to Los Angeles to join Gus Edwards here. Does the addition of these two running backs, when you hear about this signing, is your immediate reaction, oh, they're drafting a running back? Or is your immediate reaction because of the connection with Greg Roman, oh, this is going to be a running back by committee situation?
Both. So for me, you're looking at Dobbins and everybody loves it because, it's him and Edwards back together with Greg Roman. But let's face it, Edwards is 28-ish and pretty much a short yardage goal line guy. Dobbins, coming off an Achilles, I love Dobbins, but he's had some very unfortunate injury luck the last few years. So he's no guarantee to really,
It's very kind of you, Brian, to say no guarantee. I guarantee you he's going to be hurt by week 4 because I've drafted him the last 3 years.
And I just mean there's no guarantee that he hit the ground running.
No, I know what you mean.
The pun and
physically,
and we don't know. Even Akers before he hurt his second Achilles seemed stiff. Coming back from that Achilles. So I think it will be an annoying committee. But since we know Jim Harbaugh just doesn't believe in the forward pass, there might be enough to go around. I do expect them, though, to draft a running back to be part of that committee. And maybe even given what's there, might even be the quote-unquote lead back, whatever that's worth. I don't think it's going to be Blake Corum. I just think just because people are so convinced it's going to be, it's not going to be. So, yeah.
So Thor Nystrom over at Fantasy Pros just released his player comp evaluations for 500 rookies in this draft class. And so I want to bring the attention now to the running back position in terms of rookies. Jamie, we'll get to your trade question in just a second. I want you guys to tell me which comparison just does not make the most sense to you. Okay. And so let me rattle them off. So Trey Benson to DeMarco Murray, former Cowboys running back, former Eagles running back, Titans running back. The second one is Jalen Wright to Tony Pollard, Jonathan Brooks to Aaron Jones, the aforementioned Blake Corum to Devin Singletary, and then Kamani Vidal to Jaylen Warren. If you had to pick one of those comparisons, which one for you just does not make sense? For me, I don't get the Corum Singletary comparison. Because Singletary, you knew that he was shifting, he was elusive. You saw how well he played down the stretch for Houston last year as a running back. And, a lot of the talk about Blake Corum is that he's just one of those grinded out running backs, doesn't really do anything too special.
Or is that special in the title game last year?
Well, again, is that in and of itself an inappropriate, inaccurate assessment? That remains to be seen. But let's start with you, Rhett. Is any of those comparisons that just threw out there kind of shock you at all, or do they seem kind of?
I think the Blake Corum one is kind of one where you mentioned where it kind of feels like a little bit off. I mean, the thing that kind of surprises me though is whenever you look at When I think of DeMarco Murray in his prime, I think of more of a bruiser. And when I think of Trey Benson coming out in this draft, he's one of these guys. He's seen as one of the more explosive guys that is coming into this draft. Personally, for me, that one that I kind of like the best, and if he does work out this way, you're going to see a very long and very fruitful career, would be Jonathan Brooks to Aaron Jones. I really like that comp because just watching Jonathan Brooks, I mean, I see him on tape. He's not a super bursty guy, but what he does is I've seen him in the hole. He kind of just moves to kind of just evade things here and there so well to find an extra yard or two where he really shouldn't. So I'm a Brooks guy. He's been my RB1 in this whole way. And since we're talking dynasty, I know people like to take into account this year, but long term, I mean, I have to love Jonathan Brooks. He's just that guy to me.
Brian, what are your thoughts here on these comparisons?
I agree. The Corum Singletary one is perhaps the iffiest. I think Corum he's a little heavier, has a little more. He's not a power back, but definitely has, I think, more play strength to his game than Singletary does. If you're talking Singletary, that's Bucky Irving to me. But also the Jalen Wright, Tony Pollard one is maybe second place, runner up here. I love Jalen Wright, relatively speaking. I wrote a profile for him, and for me, and maybe I'm not remembering Pollard coming out of college well enough, but I think Pollard's got more wiggle, more lateral movement, and more receiving chops, at least proven receiving chops than Jalen Wright does. I think Jalen Wright is a sufficient receiver and can be, but had very low usage in college.
Keith, what about you? Are there any of these comps there that just and quite frankly, do you buy into the comp narrative just because we're assuming that they're going to pan out with these range of outcomes? Yeah.
Funny you should say that, Jorge. I hate player comps. You'll never hear me say this guy is like this guy. I don't really understand it. To me, it's very similar to people getting overly excited about watching guys, run 40s in shorts and t-shirts. Like it just, to me, it's dumb. You can't really prove one way or the other. It is that way, and it's unfair to the players, right? Like, let them be their own person. You can definitely say, who they are, the stats that they have, the skills that they have, but I just don't think you have to necessarily compare people to others. I understand some people enjoy it, and that's fine, whatever, but you'll never hear me say, like, this guy's this guy. Just I'm more worried about what they can actually do.
And he's not joking, fellas. Like the week after the NFL draft happened, and we were talking here on Fantasy Football Weekly with Kevin Tompkins, just talking about the draft, the combine, just talking about the combine, saying the word combine, like Keith went like red as red can be, ready to just shit all over it. So that was,
I don't hate the combine. I hate how much of a big deal it is and how like people obsess over it when literally you can look up what the people did. And I think that that's not a bad reference to have, but I just feel like we've seen over and over again, numbers don't necessarily equate to success. I mean, like I'm actually more interested in their size and stuff. I think that plays a big factor in a lot of positions, like how big actually is somebody, because those college heights and weights and something are sometimes considerably different when they actually show up and have an unbiased person taking their height, weight, etc.
You mean the 6'5", but really a 6'2.5"?
Yeah, like wrestling, like the guy that's 6'4" and it's like standing next to the airport. It's like, I don't think so, bro.
Real quick on Kamani Vidal, who, by the way, is a guy who's one of my favorite sleepers.
I like, I do too. I like him a lot.
That comp from Thor came from the player himself. If I remember correctly, Thor asked him at the Senior Bowl, who would you comp yourself to? And I believe Vidal himself said Jalen Warren. Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's get to a trade question here. Rhett, let's take it back to you here. Would you sell Dobbins right now for the 306?
Based off of the potential injury scare that is J.K. Dobbins, I mean, the walking injury scare, I mean, you would probably, if you're playing scared, I would say you take the 306 immediately. But here's the thing is that I'm a person that hates trying to build my team around what ifs and injuries, because what if J.K. Dobbins gets hurt? Well, what if he doesn't get hurt and he emerges as the lead back in LA? And because we know the talent
They're
is
going to
there.
run the ball, and they're going to run the ball, right? Harbaugh is going to run the rock.
So, like, there's also the idea of around the fact that, well, maybe if they put enough bodies in there, maybe this is the year that J.K. Dobbins comes through and finally plays 12, 13 games. And if not, that's fine. But are you trading a guy and getting anything for a guy that, if we're being perfectly honest, you're probably drafting in startups, at least the 10th round? Like, you're getting them pretty late at this point. I mean, it's a low-risk move to begin with. So, I mean, if you are hedging on a low-risk move, then in my opinion, you're really just not trying that hard to win.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Let's shift over to best ball really quick. Kevin Tompkins is not here, but Keith Fleming's here. And it's just so happened that we're very lucky today, this Wednesday, April 18th, 2024, because immediately following Fantasy Football Weekly, we have the debut of the Fantasy and Frames draft show with host Stacey Perez. And we're basically any type of draft that exists, they're going to be doing on this show, whether it's a best ball draft, whether it's one of the ones on Underdog or DraftKings, or they'll do high stake drafts like on FFPC. They'll do Scott Fishbowl mock drafts. They'll do rookie drafts following the NFL draft. I feel like if I say drafts again, I'm going to slap myself, but I have to because there's so many different types of drafts that exist out there. Redrafts, you name it. And so tonight they're going to be taking on Underdog's big board draft, pre-NFL draft. And, Keith, I kind of want to get your opinion on this first because you'll be with her tonight as co-host there. I did a big board draft the other day, and it was my first Underdog draft of the year. I know I'm behind the curve to some degenerates out there. And, of course, I did this at 1 o'clock in the morning, so I feel that makes me a kind of a degenerate, which I don't know why I was doing it that late, but I ended up doing it that way. And I was looking at ADP, and I found it very interesting that prior to the NFL draft, the price and cost for rookies based on ADP is ridiculous. Like, rookies were more front-loaded in the ADP for Underdog than I remember seeing the year before and the year before that. I kind of wanted to start with, Keith, with you here. Why do you think that could potentially is? And there's no right or wrong. Obviously, we don't know the reason, but the fact that prior to the NFL draft, you would think after the draft you'd get more, costs. There to be higher costs for these players. Give a rationale as to why they're more expensive now?
There's a lot of stupid people out there. Is honestly the probably correct answer. I mean, I get it if you want to take a chance, but we've talked about this on several shows. I think I kind of need to know where a rookie's going before I'm all in on. Like, there's very few guys like that I'm just like, okay, I'm all in on this rookie, because so much depends on the situation. We see it in real football all the time. Like, I think that there's been a lot of QBs, especially, that they never have a chance because they get on a team with bad offensive weapons, a bad offensive line, and you're just screwed. I mean, look at Trevor Lawrence the first year with Urban Meyer, right? Like, that's a prime of example of what we saw, in the next 2 years. I know he didn't have a great year this year, but that he is that guy, and just because he was in a terrible situation. So I look at it like, let them take them. If you want to take a chance on one or two, that's fine. Like, I mean, it's free country. Do whatever you want to do. But I would much rather draft players that I know where they're going, because in best ball, so much about it is just, you want volume. It's in my opinion, a lot like DFS, that I want guys, especially with later picks, that I know are going to get the ball a lot. And you definitely want guys that you take early to get the ball a lot. And who knows what's going to happen with, honestly, any of these rookies outside of Caleb Williams, because we know where he's going and what his situation is.
Brian, for me, when I saw this ADP and the shift towards having rookies being higher up the board there, this to me screamed like the people who are doing these drafts and setting these ADPs are the type of people who are having their dynasty drafts and rookie drafts prior to the NFL draft. Like, these are the hardcore dynasty degenerates who are taking gambles right off the bat. Would that be an accurate assessment of what you're hearing based off of what we're talking about?
Perhaps. I think the number of dynasty leagues that do that is is I think small enough that but I'm gonna push back a little bit.
Yeah.
As a DGen who's done more underdog drafts than he wants to admit, and who can't afford to do them and still does them, I think the top guys are pushed up. Like Marv is wide receiver 9, and that's a little Caleb at 12. That's a little spicy, but the guys that you can scoop, like Xavier Worthy's like wide receiver 50. Like, give it to me all day. Like even Rome, I think was it wide receiver 30 last time I checked. Tight ends, forget it. Running backs, forget it. Like, 18th to 20th round, you're getting guys like Vidal or Bucky Herb. Like, I personally think that the real high end guys, because of rookie fever and they're sexy, their ADP is too high. But because a lot of people doing underdog only know the big names, the other guys I think are a value. So kind of splitting. Yeah.
Got a comment here from Jamie. Ricky Purcell went in the 16th round in one of the drafts he just did there. Okay, I just wanted to mention that, bring that up with you all. And of course, also trying to plug the Fantasy and Frames draft show, which starts in about 20 minutes with Stacey Perez, Keith Fleming, and Richard Sickles, a late addition to the show. So that should be a good show for you all to watch, where they do the big board draft over on Underdog. But let's get into kind of like the main parts of the show topic today. And let's get into Dynasty strategy. Rhett, let's kick it back up to you. Again, like we said earlier, we're a week away from the NFL draft. We know this draft class is wide receiver heavy. We've done plenty of mocks, all of us in our spare time, where we're noticing, okay, well, we're getting a lot of value at, wide receiver and quite frankly at running back in the second and third rounds, early third rounds of rookie drafts. But if you're looking to acquire, let's say, and I'll just throw out a hypothetical situation right now, Rashee Rice, okay, given all the legal situations that's going on right now, and given the depth of all the rookie class here at wide receiver, what kind of move is too pricey for you for Rashee Rice versus something that would be acceptable as somebody who's trying to acquire Rashee Rice?
Pre-charges, Rashee Rice would have been worth a late first to me. Post charges, I'm probably saying that's probably more along the lines of mid-second is where I would probably be ready to take a deal for Rashee Rice, in my opinion. I mean, he's just one of these guys where if everything comes out and he's able to go through a suspension, come back and play, and somehow avoid jail time, and let's say he has a 4-game suspension, then long-term in Dynasty, if the KC Chiefs stick by him, then yeah, you still have a dude there, and then a mid-second round pick feels like a freaking bargain at that point.
Now let's go to draft night. It's the last pick in the first round. I say draft night, but technically there are 2 draft nights, Thursday and Friday. Anyhow, I'm getting off track. And let's say with the last pick in the first round, the Kansas City Chiefs select Troy Franklin. As somebody who's looking to potentially acquire Rashee Rice, knowing now that the Kansas City Chiefs just took, potentially their alpha wide receiver at the end of the first round, how quick are you to send out that trade offer for Rashee Rice as soon as that happens?
Well, I'm going to say this, and that I personally think the Kansas City Chiefs alpha is already in the room this year with Hollywood Brown. So for me, you're looking at whether it's who's going to be that wide receiver 2. Is it going to be Rashee Rice, or would it be, in this hypothetical, a Troy Franklin? And then at that point, you almost have to, honestly, in that situation, because I'm not as high on Troy Franklin as most people, I mean, I might be holding on Rashee Rice and seeing what plays out in the long run, because you are in a dynasty format.
Brian, well, yeah, back to you in terms of the narrative of Rashee Rice and the Chiefs potentially addressing the wide receiver position in the draft. One, is Rashee Rice even somebody that you really care about acquiring, personally speaking? And if you were giving advice to somebody who did want to get Rashee Rice, when would you expect to be the best time to put out an offer to get the best value for him?
So I was probably a little bit lower on Rice than most people before the charges, and I seem to be higher than most people now after the charges. I don't think the charges don't mean much to me. It's going to get pled down. He'll miss 2 to 4 games, do some community service, pay some fines, get sued in civil court, and be easily paid off. We're done. He's rich. That's what happens with courts. So I don't think it's major at all. But I do think that it does affect prices, which we like. As far as giving somebody advice to acquire Rice and also thinking about the draft, I think you wait till after the draft, because if the Kansas City Chiefs draft somebody 32 or even the second round, that's going to probably make his price better. And I don't think if he makes it out of the draft unscathed, quote unquote, like we always worry about with running backs and stuff, I don't know that his price is going to be higher than it is today anyway. So might as well wait till after. Yeah.
Keith, let me ask you a question here. And this is purely just reading the room of your friends in your Dynasty League or just in the Dynasty League in general. How good of a strategy do you find it to be on draft night, where everybody on the first round of the draft and every single round of the draft next week, how smart is it to just play off of people's emotions based off of where they feel these players should be ranked to or should be drafted to, and making a trade offer during the NFL draft? Like, does that sound like a smart strategy to you, or do you think people will see through that and kind of be more reserved as far as where they make trades in their dynasty leagues for these rookies?
I mean, if you're casual about it, sure, of course. I mean, if people, since everybody wants to let everyone know what every opinion they've had about everything ever on social media, you probably can find out information on what players they like. And I think that all of that stuff, especially in a dynasty league compared to normal leagues, is year after year you're with these people. So kind of their football takes, who they like, etc. So you should absolutely use that to your advantage. I will also say, though, on Rashee Rice, I'm trying to buy him everywhere. I believe exactly what Brian is saying, that because no one died, and I'm not trying to be morbid or anything, but that is, just the deal. He's from that area. I don't see them making him serve jail time. I think he's just going to get maybe probation. He's definitely going to get suspended by the league. We'll see how long that is. But, I mean, this is a guy that was third in the lead in YAC last year, second in target accuracy, third in target separation. The big thing to me, Patrick Mahomes, fifth highest QBR when targeting him. When you are attached to Patrick Mahomes and he is even better, or, at his best when he's throwing to you, I think he's going to get targeted a lot. And we saw last year, Travis Kelce is getting older. I also agree with Rhett, though, about Marquise Brown. I'm higher on him than a lot of other people as well, just because, again, it's Mahomes. If you look what he's dealt with, Brown is a good receiver. Like, is he like the greatest receiver in the world? No. So I think both of those guys are good options this year. And I actually think we're going to see the Chiefs offense add another receiver, add another offensive weapon in this class, maybe beef up the O-line. And the last 2 years were the floor, I think, for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs from an offensive standpoint. And we're going to see them starting to build a good offense moving forward. And Rashee Rice is going to be a big part of that.
All right. So sticking with that thought narrative of players that you're trying to go after in Dynasty right now, a week before the NFL draft, let's go to Rhett, and then we'll go around the frames. Rhett, who is one of your top guys that you're trying to go get right now, a week before the NFL draft in Dynasty leagues?
Oh, now I've been banging this drum all off season, and I'm not getting off the drum now. We're banging it harder, baby. It's Bryce Young. Because I was looking at Dynasty League Foot, I was looking at DLF, and I was looking at some of these trade offers that they're getting for him. He's at an all-time low right now because he couldn't have been worse last year, and he's an extremely strong buy candidate this year. Some of these trades that have happened recently for Bryce Young. Josh Palmer for Bryce Young, straight up, which is the silliest thing I've heard in my life. Bryce Young and 302 for Kirk Cousins and 402. And then 108 312, and a 2025 first for Jordan Addison, Bryce Young, and the 303. So your boy is being valued as basically a throw-in in trades right now. And they're going to improve they're going to improve that receiver situation. They already have with Deontay Johnson. They've improved that offensive line. They've brought in a head coach that is young and has groomed quarterbacks the past couple of seasons. I mean, it just feels like it's almost easy money right now. And I get it. You're not starting him as your first quarterback in a league. I understand that. But in a super flex, if you want to take a flyer on a second quarterback that can potentially have really good long-term value and you can get for dirt cheap, Bryce Young is that dude.
Brian, let's go to you. If you had to list one or two or however many players you want to talk about that you're trying to acquire right now, 1 week before the NFL draft, who would they be?
Yeah, so I'll start from player number 34 and then work my way up. No, so I agree. Bryce Young is a good one. He is definitely undervalued along the similar lines of an undervalued quarterback. If we go by underdog ADP, Justin Herbert's quarterback 15. And I know we keep talking about how much Harbaugh is going to run, but in a dynasty format, his value is definitely lower than it has been with all this talk of Greg Roman and all that. So he's probably a good buy. And I'm going to go a little bit obscure here. This kind of buy is mainly a waivers thing. Colby Parkinson, tight end on the Rams. They gave him $15.5 million guaranteed money. Higbee had a very late January 14th major injury, both ACL and MCL, I believe. He's also, pushing 32 next January, I think. The only competition at the moment right now is Davis Allen. And while he flashed last year, you probably don't want Davis Allen as your tight end one. And you probably told us that by giving Parkinson that much guaranteed money. He's only 25, won't be 26 until next January. Has flashed before. Ceiling was capped in the Shane Waldron multi-tight end hellscape. And he did have some good red zone targets. He had 2 top 12 tight end finishes last year, and he's pretty much $2 on your waiver wire. Go grab you some Colby Parkinson. If it doesn't work out or they draft some, special tight end or whatever, who cares? You spent $2 of your fab.
Rhett, let's go back up to you. Got another question here, trade question. Would you rather have Rice or the 212 and Marquise Brown? Obviously, I think I know which way you're going here, right?
I think I'm going to lean 212 and Marquise Brown in this situation simply because, number one, the wide receiver run one in Kansas City, in my opinion, and that 212 can be somebody who in a draft as deep as this can end up being potentially very interesting. So I think you, for one, right now have potentially the best player in the deal in Marquise Brown on that side. And also you have what could be an interesting pick in that deal as well. So I would take side B in that situation.
Keith, I'm assuming you'd want side A and you want to hold on to Rice, right?
Yeah. I would. Yeah, I would. I just think he's a better asset moving forward. And I'm not as high on second round draft picks as a lot of other people in Dynasty. But I'm also not a Dynasty expert. I just play it for fun. So I can say that.
Brian, break the tie. Which side would you have here?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? I think you can get more for Rice in the streets. But I think I might lean the other side. If I use the 212 as a trade chip, especially, if we're talking about picking somebody, it's practically a third and your hit rate isn't going to be very high. So maybe I go take that 212 and add it to something else and do some other trade. I am higher on Brown than most folks. I'm higher on Brown relative to Rice as far as like people automatically assuming that Rice is the wide receiver one, all that sort of thing. But let's face it, right? There's also the fact that, Marquise Brown has had repeated injuries to like the same foot and ankle. And he's had to deal with very bad quarterback play. So he's kind of been out of sight, out of mind. And I get that, but he's a 178-pound, outside receiver who he's going to get some deep looks from Mahomes, but might be boom bust. It's tough. It's tough. So I'm not gonna break the tie. I'm going to say there's an argument for both sides depending on what you're doing. Yeah.
Now, I will say this. I'm looking at a mock draft on Fantasy Pros right now, a Superflex 4-round, and just for some perspective on what that 212 could be. 2-9 in this one is Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, Xavier Legette at the 211, Braylon Allen at the 212. Then at the 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, you're looking at Roman Wilson, Spencer Rattler, Jermaine Burton, 3-4, Ray Davis. So some awfully interesting players are on that late second range. And so, I mean, it's just depends on what you like. And if you think one of those guys can really hit late in the second, then it might sway it the other way.
All right, let's round out the show. I'm going to do things a little bit different, and I'm just going to throw out some names on the fly, and we're going to talk about whether they're bulletproof or not bulletproof. And bulletproof definition is they're going to come in their rookie year, wherever they land, and they're going to produce for fantasy. By the end of the season, you're going to be like, I got a steal, and not a steal, but like I got a good rookie because they're already producing, or they're not bulletproof in that they may need a year before they start producing. Does that sound good to y'all?
Sound good.
All right, so let's start with the quarterback position, and we'll go through some of the popular names here. Caleb Williams, is he an immediate fantasy guy? And let me break that down even further. I don't want to say super flex because I feel like that's just going to make it more of an obvious yes, right? So in one quarterback leagues, whether for redraft or for dynasty, is he bulletproof, Brian, this year, or is he going to need a couple years to get ready?
That's tough. I don't really play in one QB, but I will say that there's a theory with one QB that the studs matter, you know, and so there's positional advantage and that sort of thing. Here's the thing. We know quarterback bust rates are high in the first round. Tell me a quarterback this good that's landing in a spot that good in Chicago.
I can't tell you.
Right. So I lean bulletproof, although asterisk nobody's bulletproof.
Keith, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams is going to be the real deal.
Right.
He's going to hit the ground running, potentially high in quarterback 2 this season, maybe low in quarterback 1. So I think he's going to be a pretty safe guy this year.
All right, let's stick back with you, and let's go Jaden Daniels.
Okay. Jaden Daniels, rushing upside almost makes him bulletproof just by default. I'll just leave it at that.
Keith?
Same.
Right. Ryan?
Nope. I'm very skeptical of Jaden Daniels. Yeah.
All right, let's go to now the wide receiver position, which is quite frankly the most popular position for Dynasty and potentially for redraft and best ball. And we've talked about him a lot, so let's keep this going. Marvin Harrison, year 1. Bulletproof, not bulletproof, Rhett.
If he's in Arizona, he's absolutely bulletproof, and he's going to end the season as a wide receiver 1. I just think there's just Kyler Murray finally getting that level of guy would just be too appetizing to not go with.
Keith, Malik Neighbors, bulletproof or not bulletproof?
I mean, like, are you saying like a wide receiver 1? I don't, because I mean,
like sure, not like a top 36 wide receiver 1 through 3.
No, I mean, again, with these rookies, I don't know where they're going. So,
all right, we're just calling your shot. You're just calling your shot, like random calling a shot. Nobody's going to be holding it to you a week from now or 2 weeks from now. Like, oh, how could you say that he was bulletproof? No, this just because
that's what I'm saying is like, to my point, like, or I understand what you're saying. It's just like Harrison, I could understand. Outside of that, there's none of these receivers that I would say are bulletproof. Not knowing where their landing is going. Same thing kind of for the running backs, QBs. Again, Caleb is the one guy, Bowers and Harrison to be. I don't think it really matters, but the rest of them, I need to kind of know where they're going.
Even Ladd McConkey,
who I love, but I still want to know where he's going because say he ends up in Arizona, Murray gets here week 2, and then he's catching passes from Desmond Ridder. I don't have high hopes for my boy.
Brian, let me throw a name here at you. Rome Odunze.
The argument that people have for Rome is solid floor, and you would think that lends yourself to being bulletproof. He needs, personally, my opinion, I love Rome. I'm a wide receiver 3. Like, when I think about Harrison, Neighbors, Rome. That's descending as far as ways they can win. He's got a narrower path to winning. He needs a quarterback that can throw outside the numbers, that is confident in throwing contested catch, that can do back shoulder. So I'm going to say no, he's not bulletproof.
See, I agree with you. I think a lot of the sites that are doing mock drafts, they project him going to the Bears for their second pick in the top 10. And to me, I think that screams, okay, he's not bulletproof year one, just because you have Keenan Allen there, at least for this year. You have DJ Moore. It's next year when Keenan Allen's not there, which I don't think they're going to re-sign him. I think he becomes a free agent next year. And then you're going to see Rome kind of take off there. So, Keith, to your point, though, I actually think Ladd McConkey is going to be that wide receiver that has that bulletproof potential. The guy's just a great route runner. You were down there at the Senior Bowl. He was torching defenders left and right. Like you put out like a 10-minute TikTok viral clip that we put out there on our TikTok channel, which if you haven't already, head over to TikTok, subscribe to Fantasy and Frames. He's just, I don't even want to say sneaky good. He's just really fucking good.
He really is. I mean, if you look at like what he did in high school, the situation of how he ended up at Georgia, and I mean, he literally was basically a no-star recruit with a few months left in his senior season, ended up at Georgia, and I mean, it's been really good. And it's not, I love Georgia. It's not like, though, that Stetson Bennett was the greatest QB in the world. And he put up absurd numbers within the first 2 years. And he also was injured for the second half of this season. So I'm with you. And I think he's going to go in that range where he's probably going to end up with a good QB, because he's probably like the late first round, or maybe one of these teams with a good QB trades up early in the second.
All right, let's round out this segment. Rhett, let's throw it back up to you. Which of these quarterbacks in year two are you kind of excited to see? Depending on landing spot.
Okay, depending on landing spot, I'm just gonna go ahead and just have the hot take of the show right here. You said we could have fun, so let's just have some fun.
Let's have some fun. That's right.
JJ McCarthy, if he goes to Minnesota, might be viable year one. And I look at it this way. We saw Justin Jefferson show out with complete donkeys last year after Kirk Cousins got hurt. Jordan Addison had a great year one. TJ Hawkinson, one of the top 3 tight ends in the league. They added Aaron Jones, who is going to be much better than Alexander Mattison was last year, and comboed that with Ty Chandler. All I'm saying is this. JJ McCarthy, if he goes to Minnesota, is not walking into a bear cupboard situation, not to mention the fact that Kevin O'Connell and that offense love throwing the football. So that is a guy that might be a surprise year one contributor for some people if he goes to Minnesota.
Right. Now, I know you also have thoughts on Bo Nix, right? And for me, I feel like the quarterback wasteland for the NFL draft is New England. I feel like whichever quarterback goes to New England, like, you're going to be waiting a while before things get turned around. But is there anybody there that you may think would be a good fit for the Patriots? Maybe not in year one, but going forward in year two?
I mean, I think the best fit for them probably is either going to be Jaden or Drake. But that's just a matter of, you have to ask the question. They signed my man, Jabroni Brisket, a.k.a. Jacoby Brissett.
Wow.
To presumably hold the throne this year ahead of time in place of that quarterback one, so they can develop slowly. Everything we're hearing, smokescreen or not, is that the Patriots are trying to build it up slowly, build it up from the front, all these different things. So for me, I personally think the way it's looking right now is you're going to see Caleb 1. It sounds like it's going to be Jaden at 2. Maybe the draft actually starts at 3. Maybe they trade out of that spot, or maybe they take Bo Nix later on in the first round. That feels like a very Patriots thing to do, considering who they are and how they've operated in the past and trading down. I think the best fit would actually be Drake, because if something goes wrong this year, I think he has the best physical skill set to come in and at least be exciting and have the production to maybe build off of it and have a little bit of Will Levis level hype in year two, as in a guy who maybe won't blow the doors off of the hinges in year one, but show some flashes heading into that second year. So Drake May for me if he's in New England.
Nice. All right. Let's round out the show talking about just whatever the hell we want to talk about. And let's start with the first thing. Let's talk about what we're working on right now. Brian, anything you want to plug in and outside the world of fantasy football?
Yeah, so as far as fantasy football goes, obviously you can see FFJunkie_ on Twitter. Goingfor2.com is rankings and articles. Been doing a lot of rookie profiles lately. I also do a podcast called The Dynasty Saturday Night 5 on the Going for Two Live YouTube channel, 7:30 Eastern, live every Saturday night with Josh Walker. And midweek audio only, I do Dynasty Fever podcast. It's at Dynasty Fever Pod on Twitter. That's more of like a long form thing. Like the way that I sell it, even though there's nothing to sell, is if you dropped in on two friends who love Dynasty and had like an hour and a half long conversation and you just were a fly on the wall, that's kind of what it's like. And as far as outside fantasy football, shortly before I left Fantasy and Frames, I discovered I'm autistic, and it's still April. It's still Autism Acceptance Month. So go and learn about stuff. There's a lot of folks like me who slip through the cracks and are finding out late in life, and it's not always easy. And although it explains a lot, it doesn't get less difficult to exist. So please learn about that. And also, the next 4 nights, Fish is playing the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Yes.
So I'm going to be watching some of the webcasts of that. But it's like what is that? What Pacific time? So maybe I'll watch the next day. Yeah.
Awesome points over there. Autism awareness. I gotta be honest with you. I really hate the whole narrative that this is this month, this is this causes month. That this should be a year-long thing for all these special causes. So thank you very much for bringing that up in the show. Keith, anything in and outside the world of fantasy football you want to plug?
No, just you can find all my stuff on my Twitter /X. It's right there at Keith Fleming. But again, happy birthday, Jorge.
Thank you very much, sir. Rhett, what about you? In and outside the world of fantasy football, things you want to plug?
First off, Twitter /X at @REmanuel Sports. Really need to get more active there. But lately, if you've really been into the idea of divorced dad rock, been talking about a lot of Creed lately on Twitter. So that's stuff that I've been doing. Besides that, 4th and Frames Wednesday night with Chris and Drew. 2 of the best in the business, in my opinion. Just always bringing the fire. Those two. Recently did a show last week with Bob Harris on his live stream. That's there. Bob, one of the best in the business, just incredible at what he does. Besides that, just giving shout outs to people who are out here giving people opportunities in the space. People like you, Jorge, people like Howard Bender, Bob Harris, the Fantasy Pros team, just Going for Two, just all these spaces that are giving little upstart people like myself the opportunity to get their voice out there. I mean, y'all are doing the Lord's work, and it's so appreciated.
Well, I want to thank everybody here for joining us tonight. Brian, thank you very much for coming on board. Welcome back anytime. Don't forget, folks, in about 5 minutes or so, the Fantasy Football Draft Show will commence with Stacey Perez, Keith Fleming, and Richard Sickles. And again, a week from today, we will not have our show. Instead, we will have the first round live coverage here with the Fantasy and Frames family. So stay tuned for that. So everybody who's been tuning in tonight, thank you very much, and we'll see you all in a couple weeks.